Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. Jagged percussion, the first stone detonated against the kitchen window pane. Shards of glass sprayed inward, scuttling like frantic insects across the worn floorboards. Clara's cry was a sharp, tearing sound as she pulled Maya tighter, burrowing into the shadowed corner of the rental cabin, a haven turned trap. Outside, the voices swelled, a guttural chorus thick with malice. Leave, filth, not welcome. This sanctuary, meant for respite, was twisting into a crucible, forging us into something new or breaking us entirely. I am Silas, 35 years spent architecting logic from the digital ether of the city. For months, Clara and I had envisioned this mountain pilgrimage, a chance to unfurl the map of the wild before 5-year-old Maya's wondering eyes. We'd unearthed this cabin listing online, a timbered charm tucked into a fold of the hills, promising stillness and vistas that stole breath. An antidote, we'd hoped, to the relentless thrum of urban existence, a space to simply be a family. And for 2 sun-drenched days, it was sanctuary. We traced trails through emerald forests, thick with pine scent, watched marshmallows bloom golden over crackling embers beneath a velvet drape of stars, inhaled air so clean it stung. Maya, luminous with discovery, collected pine cones like jewels. Clara's smile, usually held captive by deadlines, unfurled freely. The city's grips slackened. Then, subtly at first, the atmosphere curdled. Day 3 brought oblique stairs in the hamlet's single street. A sudden hush, falling like a dropped curtain when we entered the general store. An old man, face like weathered bark, hawking phlegm onto the dust near my boots as we passed. We tried to dismiss it, the ingrained suspicion, small, secluded places sometimes hold for the unfamiliar. That evening, the sunset painted the peaks in bruised plum hues. We lingered on the porch, soaking in the quietude, until a pickup truck fractured the peace, engine snarling. An arm thrust from the window, a brown bottle arced through the air, exploding in a starburst of glass near Clara's feet. "Go home, city freaks," the voice ripped, slurred but venomous. We recoiled into the cabin's lamplight, the bolt sliding home with a heavy thud. Clara's eyes were wide, her voice tight. "Silas, we need to go. Now." But I, clinging to our paid-for week, to the illusion of control, waved it away. "One belligerent drunk," I insisted. "We won't let him chase us off." A fool's reassurance I see now. The following day, the air in town felt viscous with resentment. Glances weren't sideways now, they were direct, flinty. Muttered words snagged at the edge of hearing. In the local diner, our breakfast order met the floor with a clatter, an accident delivered with a smirk thinly veiled as apology. Leaving, I caught fragments from a knot of men by the counter. Not our kind, city poison, tainting this place. A cold knot formed in my gut. I hustled Clara and Maya back toward the rented car, the question hammering in my skull. Why? We'd offered only courtesy, trod lightly. This animosity felt baseless, primal. Night fell, thick and starless. Then came the first impact, that jagged percussion against a kitchen glass. Another followed, punching through the plywood patch hastily nailed over the first break. Then the chanting began, a low beast growling outside our thin walls, demanding our expulsion. My call to the sheriff yielded only cold dread. Sounds like neighborly friction. His voice drawled down the line, laced with something akin to amusement. Folks get protective. Best be on your way, for tempers really fray. The click of the disconnected line echoed like a gavel. No cavalry coming, just us. Clara's face was a canvas of stark terror. Maya, small and bewildered, clung to her mother's leg. In that vacuum of hope, a different resolve hardened within me. Protect them. Get them out. Outside, the mob swelled. Torchlight cast monstrous dancing shadows against the drawn curtains, painting the scene with archaic menace. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a calculated siege, fueled by an ancient, unreasoning fear of the other. Clara, I breathed, the word barely audible. We have to run, now. Her eyes, wide but suddenly fierce, met mine, a silent accord. We moved with frantic economy, essentials jammed into a single backpack, documents, a change of clothes. Clara gathered meager rations, water bottles. Maya, bless her small, stoic heart, seemed to grasp the urgency. Her only sound, the soft friction of her hand stroking her worn plush rabbit. A splintering crack from the front door. They were breaching the threshold. Time evaporated. I steered them toward the rear bedroom, toward a narrow window I'd noted earlier, overlooking the dense woods cloaking the hillside. Helping Clara squeeze through, then lifting Maya into her arms outside. As I scrambled out myself, a roar erupted from within the cabin, the sound of violation, of discovery. We plunged into the absolute black beneath the trees, the darkness instantly engulfing us, erasing the cabin, the lights, the hate. The woods thrummed with its own nocturnal life, insectile churs, the rustle of unseen things. But louder still was the frantic drumbeat in my own chest, Clara's gasping breaths, Maya's stifled whimpers. Behind us, the angry shouts morphed into confused bellowing as they found their quarry flown. We crashed onward, blind, branches lashing like whips, unseen roots clawing at our ankles. Maya fought tears, burying her face in Clara's shoulder. Clara stumbled, a small cry escaping her lips. I caught her arm, pulling her upright, holding her for a heartbeat. "We'll make it," I murmured into her hair, the lie tasting like ash but offered like sustenance. Then a more terrifying sound, the distant growl of engines. They were mobilizing, fanning out. Panic surged, cold and nauseating. Think, Silas, think. A fragment of memory surfaced, the cabin's tourist map, a blue ribbon snaking through the green ink not far from our location. The river. Our best chance to break the scent. I veered us sideways, guided by instinct and a desperate prayer that my internal compass wasn't utterly broken by fear. Closer now, the sounds of pursuit, snapping twigs, muttered curses, the sweep of flashlight beams slicing the darkness behind us. Just as exhaustion threatened to buckle my knees, a new sound emerged, the low, insistent rush of water. Hope, sharp and painful, lanced through me. We burst from the undergrowth onto a moon-slicked bank. The river churned below, black and swift. A moment's hesitation trading one peril for another. Then a twig snapped close behind. Over there, got him. A beam pinned us. The water, I commanded, hoisting Maya high against my chest. Clara, hold on to me. We plunged in. The cold was a physical blow, stealing breath, the current instantly snatching at our legs. Clara gasped but locked her hand on my arm, her face a grim mask of resolve. Shouts erupted from the bank we'd just abandoned. We fought toward the far side, water surging, climbing to my ribs, then my chest. Maya whimpered, clinging tight. A deafening crack, a gunshot, and water splashed violently near Clara's head. Halt, right there. Terror became fuel. We lunged the final distance, clawing our way up the muddy embankment on the opposite shore. No pause for breath. We scrambled back into the concealing woods, the river a turbulent barrier between us and the hate. The sounds of pursuit dwindled. The water, it seemed, was a threshold they wouldn't cross in darkness. We followed the river's course downstream, stumbling through the pre-dawn chill, driven by adrenaline's dregs. As the first gray light filtered through the canopy, we emerged, scratched and soaked, onto the asphalt ribbon of a deserted road. An hour passed, maybe more, before the rumble of an approaching semi brought salvation. The driver, face etched with concern at our disheveled state, pulled over. We offered a fractured story, a disastrous camping trip, a sudden storm, unwilling, unable yet to voice the full horror. He deposited us in the anonymity of the next sizable town, where our first stop was the state police barracks. Here, finally, our ordeal met with grave attention. An investigation commenced, its tendrils reaching back toward the insular community, though its conclusions remained opaque to us. Whispers eventually reached us, tales of the town's quiet history of discouraging outsiders, a simmering resentment that had finally boiled over into violence. We returned to the city's familiar grid, alive but altered, carrying the phantom chill of the river, the echo of shouts in the night. We were warier now, the placid surface of the world revealed to hold jagged depths. Yet the terror had also tempered us, revealing a resilience we hadn't known we possessed, the unbreakable weld of family forged in fear. Months melted away. One evening, in the soft lamplight of our apartment, I saw Clara gazing at a photograph of mist-shrouded peaks in a magazine. "Silas," she asked softly, her voice tentative, "will we ever go back to the mountains? Not there, of course, but somewhere?" The instinct was sharp, immediate. No, never again. But then I looked at Clara, her quiet strength, and at Maya, drawing oblivious rainbows at the table, her spirit unbowed. To surrender the wild entirely would be to grant those shadows a permanent victory. "Yes," I heard myself say, the conviction solidifying as I spoke. "We will. We'll find a different trail. We won't let their darkness extinguish the light in the world for us." A slow smile touched Clara's lips, a flicker of the peace we'd sought. And I knew with certainty we were scarred but whole. We had walked through the fire together, and together we would keep walking. The initial susurrus from the eaves that first night I dismissed as the groans of an ancient structure settling into its bones, a house sighing. By the third repetition, a persistent, dry rasping directly overhead, I understood this was no architectural lament. What awaited me in that suffocating, dust-furred space above would unravel the tapestry of my existence, leaving me stranded on the frayed edge of the reality I'd known, questioning the very membrane separating our world from the otherwise. An invitation to inhabit my Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Arthur's sprawling Victorian manse while they toured the continent for a month felt like a reprieve, a gilded cage far preferable to my own cramped city dwelling. Solitude, blessed quietude for wrestling my novel into submission. The prospect was intoxicating. The house itself squatted on the town's periphery, besieged by gnarled oaks whose branches sketched long, skeletal fingers across the neglected lawn. From the instant I crossed the threshold, an aberrant quality hung in the air, stagnant, thick with the cloying perfume of naphthalene and decaying paper. As I hauled my luggage up the protesting staircase, each tread groaning like a confession, the distinct sensation of being observed prickled the back of my neck. Nerves, I reasoned. The unfamiliarity of such grand, decaying space. 2 days dissolved uneventfully. A rhythm established itself, mornings dedicated to the blank page, afternoons spent wandering the echoing halls and overgrown grounds, mapping the house's peculiar geography. Then came the third night and the shift. I was wrenched from sleep by a sound slicing through the silence from the attic, a faint, insistent skittering, like tiny sharp claws whirring at old timber. Bleary, disoriented, my eyes found the clock face, 3:17 a.m. The hour of the wolf, in some forgotten corner of my mind whispered. Nothing. I breathed into the oppressive dark, clutching the duvet tighter. A squirrel, maybe, a misplaced bird. Yet lying rigid, straining to decipher the nocturnal acoustics, the scratching intensified, gained a chilling persistence. It bore no resemblance to any woodland creature I could name. A cadence pulsed within it, measured almost expectant, as if the source knew I was listening and sought acknowledgement. Sleep became an impossibility thereafter. I thrashed in the sheets, my imagination a fertile ground for terrors blooming in the dark. Dawn arrived not as a comfort, but as a pale, exhausted witness to my frayed state. Every creak of timber, every sigh of wind against the eaves became a jolt to my system. I squandered the daylight hours delving into the property's lineage, seeking some historical anchor, some tragedy or rumor that might explain the nocturnal disturbances. But the house yielded no secrets, merely a prosaic history of ownership, generations passing through its rooms without recorded incident or particular sorrow. Evening descended, dragging with it a miasma of dread that coiled low in my gut. Television offered a flickering, hollow distraction, but the scratching recommenced earlier this time, louder. A relentless auditory assault, impossible to ignore, a constant gnawing reminder of the presence overhead, waiting. Investigation was no longer a choice, but an imperative. Access to the attic was via a hatch embedded in the ceiling of the upper landing. My hands, slick with nervous sweat, fumbled with the cord, pulling down the folding ladder. Its descent echoed unnervingly in the stairwell. I aimed my torch upward, its beam cutting a swathe through the Stygian gloom, illuminating a cavern choked with spectral shapes, furniture draped in shrouds of dust, stacks of forgotten boxes like monolithic tombs. Gossamer threads of cobwebs drifted from the rafters like decaying lace. The air, thick and cloying with the scent of time and neglect, felt heavy enough to suffocate. Drawing a ragged breath, I ascended, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat surely audible to whatever lurked in the shadows above. Initially, nothing seemed amiss beyond the expected detritus of decades, just the accumulated strata of forgotten possessions. But as the torch beam swept across the far wall, a flicker of incongruous light snagged my attention, metal gleaming dully behind a barricade of cartons. I navigated the obstacle course of junk, displacing boxes that sighed plumes of dust, until the source was revealed. A door, diminutive, incongruously ornate, inset directly into the plaster wall. Its brass handle, fashioned into some Baroque swirl, was filmed with verdigris. It radiated an aura of profound wrongness, a fairy tale portal inexplicably embedded in the mundane architecture of a suburban attic. Hesitantly, I reached out. The instant my fingertips brushed the cool, tarnished metal, the scratching erupted anew, sharp and frantic, emanating directly from behind the impossible door. My hand recoiled as if burned. A strangled gasp escaped me. This defied logic. The house's exterior contours allowed for no such hidden chamber, yet overriding every primal instinct, screaming retreat, a morbid curiosity propelled me forward. My fingers closed around the handle, turned. With a low, protesting groan, the door swung inward, unveiling a darkness so absolute, so profound, it seemed to actively consume the torchlight. The scratching ceased abruptly, replaced by a silence that pressed in on my ears. I leaned in, squinting, attempting to pierce the impenetrable void. It was then I felt it, an icy exhalation against my cheek, carrying a scent both ancient and cloying, musty decay, threaded with a sickeningly sweet undertone. Hello? My voice was a thready whisper, swallowed by the hush. Is anyone there? The reply manifested not as language, but as a sudden, violent surge of air that snuffed out my torch beam and sent me staggering back. I stumbled, losing my footing on the dusty floorboards, but the threshold had been crossed. Awareness had been established. Something was stirring, uncoiling from the blackness. I heard it before visual confirmation, a susurrus, a fluid, slithering movement that raised gooseflesh along my arms. And then they emerged, pouring from the aperture like viscous smoke, dozens of them. Figures, silhouettes, vaguely humanoid yet fundamentally wrong in ways that defied articulation. Their locomotion was unnervingly graceful, physics-defying, flowing into the attic space with liquid ease. A scream lodged in my throat, useless. Flight was an alien concept. My limbs were locked in a rictus of terror, unlike any fear I had ever conceived. They formed a silent circle around me, their featureless expanses somehow radiating an insatiable, primordial hunger that leached the warmth from my blood. One entity drifted closer, its limb elongating with impossible elasticity. Fingers, colder than glacial ice, brushed my cheek. The contact was electric, jolting, and in that instant comprehension flooded me, unbearable, shattering. Visions cascaded, worlds layered upon worlds, realities stacked like brittle panes of glass, an infinite cosmic onion. And within each stratum, these beings watched, waited, their unseen claws perpetually scratching at the fragile partitions between dimensions. The deluge of alien knowledge threatened to obliterate my sense of self, my consciousness fragmenting under the sheer weight of the forbidden. Just as oblivion beckoned, a shrill, mundane sound sliced through the pandemonium, my mobile phone ringing insistently from the bedroom below. The psychic hold fractured. I gasped, dragging air into my lungs like a drowning man surfacing. The shadowy forms recoiled, flowing back towards the impossible doorway like tide receding from the shore. I didn't linger. Scrabbling backwards, I found the ladder, descended with reckless speed, and slammed the attic hatch shut, the thud echoing with finality. I fled to my room, snatched the phone. Eleanor's name glowed on the screen. Hands trembling violently, I answered. "Silas, are you quite all right?" Her voice, laced with uncharacteristic anxiety, crackled across the line. I had the most peculiar feeling just now that something was amiss. My mouth opened, the urge to confess, to spill the impossible horror, warring with the certainty of disbelief. How could I articulate the abyss I'd glimpsed? I'm okay, I managed, my voice a rough croak. Just a nightmare, I suppose, a vivid one. We spoke for a few more minutes, the familiar cadence of her voice a temporary anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. But even as we exchanged pleasantries, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The world outside the window seemed subtly altered, the shadows imbued with deeper potential, the very air vibrating with unseen energies. After disconnecting, I sat on the edge of the bed, adrift. One part of me screamed to pack, to flee this house and its horrifying secret, but another part, a colder, more insistent curiosity, whispered questions. What were they? From where or when did they originate? And why manifest here, in this seemingly ordinary dwelling? The remainder of the night bled into dawn as I plunged into the digital abyss, scouring obscure forums and arcane websites dedicated to high strangeness. The search yielded fragments, echoes, chilling accounts from others who spoke of inexplicable doors, of shadows that moved with intent, of scratching sounds heralding contact. Terror warred with fascination. As the first tentative rays of sunlight pierced the dusty window panes, a decision crystallized. Leaving was no longer an option, not yet. Too many questions remained unanswered, too much of the mystery lay veiled. I would remain for now and confront the truth concealed behind that impossible portal, but not unarmed. The day was spent gathering a strange arsenal, lines of salt, packets of iron filings, hastily drawn sigils borrowed from a half-dozen disparate traditions. I had no certainty any of it would avail me, but inaction felt like surrender. Night fell once more, and with the deepening gloom came the inevitable, familiar sound from above, the dry, insistent scratching. This time, however, I ascended the ladder not in blind panic, but with grim purpose, my makeshift wards clutched tight. I braced myself. Yet nothing could have truly prepared me for the scene revealed by my renewed torch beam. The small, ornate door stood agape, and from the consuming darkness beyond, something was undeniably emerging. This is not the end, but the true commencement. The chronicle of my entanglement in a silent war fought across the borders of reality, of the unlikely allies and terrifying adversaries encountered along the way. It is a narrative steeped in cosmic dread and unforeseen transformation, tracing the razor's edge between lucidity and lunacy. Consider it, above all, a caution. To those who might discover doorways where none should logically exist, who hear the faint, inexplicable scratching in the dead hours of the night, tread carefully. Be wary of what you unseal, what you inadvertently invite across the threshold, because once the veil is rent, once you have peered beyond its fragile weave, there is no retreating to blissful ignorance. The scratching in the attic is merely the overture. The intention had never been to pause. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the monotonous thrum of tires on asphalt, traversing expanses of highway that felt less like roads and more like sutures holding empty landscapes together. Home beckoned, a faint signal across the void. Yet the needle on the fuel gauge dipped with alarming finality. The next town shimmered mirage-like, miles beyond reach. So when the stuttering fluorescence of a lone station emerged from the gloom ahead, a fractured kind of gratitude bloomed, despite the structure's air of near-total dereliction. It clung precariously to the roadside, an island in a sea of barren fields, flanked by gnarled trees that seemed petrified mid-struggle against some forgotten gale. A single pump stood sentinel, ancient and rust-wept, its paint flaking, the nozzle scarred from use. Ilara killed the engine, the sudden silence profound, almost suffocating. She stepped out into biting air, a stillness so complete it felt like the world holding its breath. Grasping the cold metal of the nozzle, she fought a rising tide of unease, concentrating on the slow, rhythmic clicks as gasoline trickled into the tank, each tick echoing unnaturally in the vast quiet. Her gaze darted, scanning the periphery, anticipating movement in the deep shadows, but finding only the vacant lot and the weak, jaundiced light spilling from the station's grimy window. Then a voice materialized from the silence. "Need assistance?" Ilara flinched violently, heart hammering against her ribs. She whirled. He stood mere feet away, his arrival utterly unheard, unseen. Tall, gaunt, with a face the color of bleached bone and eyes like dark water, reflecting the station's sickly glow. "No, I'm fine," she managed, the words catching in her throat. He remained motionless, his gaze unwavering, unsettlingly analytical, as if assessing her worth, her vulnerability. She forced her attention back to the pump, the numbers climbing with agonizing slowness. "Traveling solo?" he inquired, his tone quiet, laced with an unnerving amusement. A strained smile touched Ilara's lips. "Just passing through." He gave a slow nod, his stare never leaving her face. "Few travelers pause here now," he murmured, more to the night than to her. She offered no reply, the silence stretching taut. The pump finally gave a decisive click. With hurried movements, Ilara secured the nozzle, twisted the gas cap tight. Escape was the only imperative, putting miles between herself and this unnerving presence. "Safe journey," he offered, as she slid back into the driver's seat, the words soft, almost a taunt. No response. Engine ignited. A final glance. He stood exactly as before, a statue carved from shadow, face impassive, eyes depthless voids. Ilara pulled away, tires crunching on loose gravel, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, pulse frantic. Just some desolate outpost's strange guardian, she told herself. A harmless eccentric. Yet the conviction felt hollow, the prickling certainty that his observation had held purpose refusing to subside. She drove, the ribbon of road unfurling into the darkness, empty, silent. The station's weak lights dwindled, swallowed by the rearview mirror. Relief washed over her, potent and welcome. It was short-lived. Miles later, twin points of light bloomed in the mirror, growing rapidly, closing the distance. A knot of fear tightened in her stomach. Coincidence, surely. Another nocturnal traveler. But as the vehicle drew inexorably closer, her grip on the wheel became a vice, her heartbeat a frantic drum. The car settled directly behind her, hugging her bumper, its headlights searing her retinas through the mirror. Ilara stared fixedly ahead, chanting silent reassurances. Then the high beams flashed, once, twice, explosions of blinding white that bleached the interior of her car, turning the familiar space alien and hostile. Squinting into the mirror, she tried to discern the driver, but the glare was absolute, revealing only the menacing silhouette of the vehicle itself, far too close. Her teeth clenched. Options flickered through her mind, none viable. Abruptly, the assault ceased. The car eased back slightly, granting a sliver of breathing room. Ilara risked another look and saw him, Silas, the man from the station, pale face illuminated, dark eyes locked onto hers across the intervening space. A gasp escaped her, cold terror flooding her veins. Her foot crushed the accelerator. Why? What did he want? The questions screamed unanswered. Only the imperative remained. Flee. The road stretched ahead, a black, empty canvas, devoid of sanctuary. The speedometer needle climbed, but he matched her speed effortlessly. A predatory shadow glued to her tail, his headlights a constant accusing glare. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then salvation, or perhaps a deeper trap. A narrow side road branching off into pitch-black woodland. Impulse took over. Ilara wrenched the wheel, plunging onto the unlit track. Trees crowded in, skeletal arms grasping, the road twisting, visibility shrinking. She checked the mirror, heart leaping, hands slick with sweat. Had she lost him? For one blessed moment, the pursuing lights vanished. Darkness reclaimed the space behind her. Relief surged, a physical wave making her dizzy. It shattered instantly. Headlights erupted again, slicing through the trees. Closer now, impossibly close, filling her mirror, pinning her in their beam. Faster. She pushed the engine harder, the car bucking on the uneven surface, control fraying. Ahead, the trees abruptly parted, revealing a small, desolate clearing, a patch of bare earth. Instinct screamed. Ilara slammed the brakes, skidding to a halt in the center of the dirt lot. Dust plumed around her. His car slid in behind, headlights bathing her vehicle, the clearing in stark, interrogating light. She sat frozen, gripping the wheel, breath coming in shallow, painful bursts, waiting. A car door opened, closed. He emerged, a figure silhouetted against the blinding glare, face obscured by shadow. His posture was unnervingly calm. His gaze, though unseen, felt tangible, cold, utterly devoid of emotion. Trapped, alone, no signal bars glowed on her phone screen. Panic clawed at her throat, a silent scream trapped within. He began to walk towards her, steps measured, deliberate. Each footfall echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence. Her fingers scrabbled uselessly at the phone. He was coming closer, closer. As his shadow fell across her window, primal instinct ignited. Ilara threw the gear shift into reverse, stomped on the accelerator. Tires spun, spitting dirt. She cranked the wheel, the car slewing wildly, then finding purchase, rocketing back towards the narrow track. No backward glance, only forward momentum, fueled by raw terror. His headlights diminished, became pinpricks, then vanished. She drove without thought, without pause, engine screaming, the dark road a blur. Distance was the only solace. Miles melted away. Finally, the welcoming lights of the next town appeared, an oasis of artificial brightness. She swerved into the first well-lit service station, engine still running, hands trembling uncontrollably, breath tearing raggedly from her lungs. She scanned the lot, the road behind, every shadow. Nothing. He was gone. For a long time, Ilara simply sat, the tremors slowly subsiding, the adrenaline ebbing, leaving behind a hollow ache. The why remained elusive, a chilling enigma. Who was he? What had driven his pursuit? The answers remained lost in the desolate stretch of highway behind her. But one certainty settled, cold and absolute. Some lonely roadside beacons were best left undisturbed in the darkness. A splintering sound, sharp against the nocturnal hush, arrested my motion. 15 autumns I'd walked these woods, as Ranger Silas Thorne, their secrets my companions, their dangers familiar. Yet the pulse hammering against my ribs spoke of something new, something feral lurking just beyond sight. In that suspended moment, the familiar forest felt alien, and the looming confrontation promised a fight not just for the wild heart I guarded, but for the breath in my own lungs. Another night watch, another circuit through the whispering pines and skeletal hardwoods. The air, brittle with autumn's chill, carried the loam scent of decay and evergreen. Spectral moonlight dripped through the canopy, twisting familiar shapes into phantoms that danced with the wind's sigh. Hours melted away under the soft crunch of my boots until a low susurrus snagged my attention. Human voices where none should be. A familiar weight, the radio at my hip, beckoned, but caution stayed my hand. Lost hikers, perhaps? Yet as drawn by unseen threads I crept nearer, the sound resolved. Not the easy banter of campers, but clipped, furtive whispers. Then, unmistakable, the cold, mechanical snick of metal on metal. A weapon being readied. Ice sluiced through my veins. Trespassers. Killers. Concealed by the gnarled girth of an ancient oak, I peered into the moon-drenched clearing. The sight turned my stomach to lead. 5 figures, silhouettes bristling with rifles, clustered around the fallen majesty of a bull elk. Its lifeblood stained the leaf litter, its crown a prize worth a king's ransom on the shadow market, brutally sawn away. The vacant glassy eyes seemed to find mine, a silent accusation from the violated earth. My fingers, clumsy with dread, fumbled for the radio, too late. A dry twig, treacherous under my boot, exploded in the stillness like a firecracker. 5 heads jerked towards the sound. A frozen tableau shattered. Who's there? A guttural voice ripped the quiet rifle swinging my way. Instinct screamed louder than thought. I bolted. The forest became a nightmare maze, branches clawing at my face, the thud of pursuing feet echoing my own frantic heartbeat. Air seared my lungs. A rifle cracked, the sound swallowed by the trees, followed instantly by the thwack of lead-biting wood scant inches from my ear. I threw myself sideways, losing purchase on the slick leaf mold, and pitched headlong down a steep, tangled slope. Stars wheeled sickeningly above as I lay gasping, the impact jarring bone and breath. Above, the hunters' voices grew louder, closer. Panic surged, scrabbling upright, ignoring the fire in my side where stone met flesh. I knew flight was futile. My gaze snagged on a fallen giant nearby, a hollow log, a desperate prayer. I plunged into its dark, decaying embrace, worming my way into the cramped refuge as cones of artificial light sliced through the undergrowth. This way. The command was rough, urgent. Fan out. Find the bastard. I became stone, earth, invisible, breath held captive in my chest, the damp, mulchy interior clinging to sweat-slick skin. A brilliant beam interrogated the log's entrance, lingered, moved on. Clear here, a voice grumbled, impossibly near. Could have circled back. Another voice, sharper. Forget him. Got what we came for. Let's move before the whole damn ranger patrol descends. Their heavy tread faded into the wood's embrace. Silence returned, profound and absolute, yet I remained entombed, counting the slow hammer of my heart. Only when the quiet felt permanent, stretching into long, elastic minutes, did I dare to uncoil my protesting limbs from the log's grip. My muscles screamed defiance as I stood, stiff and disoriented, realizing the panicked flight had carried me far deeper into the wilderness. My hand sought the radio, testing its solidity, whispering a plea for its function. It crackled to life. Dispatch, this is Ranger Thorne. My voice was a strained rasp. Code 10 emergency, Sector 7. Encountered multiple armed hostiles, confirmed poaching activity, requesting immediate armed assistance. A burst of static, then the calm, clipped tones of the dispatcher. Acknowledged, Thorne. Units en route. ETA approximately 20 minutes. Report your status. Briefly, clinically, I painted the picture. The elk, the rifles, the escape. Even as I spoke, a resolve hardened within me. They wouldn't simply vanish. Advise you maintain position, Thorne, the radio instructed. Await backup. 20 minutes, an eternity. Enough time for ghosts to melt into the night, their plunder secured. Negative dispatch, I countered, the decision made. Suspects moving east, likely towards the old logging trace. I'm maintaining contact, observing from distance. Will update vector. Disregarding the voice crackling futilely from my hip, I pushed east. The earlier surge of adrenaline had ebbed, leaving behind a landscape of aches and a deep, throbbing bruise on my side. Each step jarred, but righteous fury and the ingrained habit of duty propelled me forward. The forest floor muffled my tread as I shadowed the unseen path of the poachers. Then, a low growl vibrated through the trees, engines idling. They had transport waiting near the disused fire road. Urgency lent speed to my battered legs. Reaching the fringe of the woods, I saw them. Two hulking pickup trucks, half swallowed by shadow. The men moved quickly, loading bundles, their voices tight with tension. "Should have dealt with that ranger," one snarled. "He'll have called it in." "Less talk, more loading," another snapped. "We're gone before anyone gets here." An anchor. I had to anchor them here, my gaze fixed on the thick rubber tires, a desperate gamble. Slipping through the final screen of foliage, I circled wide, using the trucks themselves as cover. They were focused inward, absorbed in their illicit task. My clasp knife felt small, inadequate, but its blade was sharp. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I broke cover. A quick slash, a satisfying shh as the first tire sighed flat. Second, third. I was wrenching the blade through the sidewall of the fourth when a sharp cry pierced the night. "Hey, you!" No hesitation. I spun and fled, weaving like a startled deer back into the welcoming darkness of the trees, the angry spit of bullets chasing my shadow. Lunging behind a massive moss-covered boulder, I collapsed, chest heaving. Pursuit faltered. They were momentarily lost in the blackness I knew intimately. "Show yourself, Ranger," one yelled, the threat barely veiled by mock reason. "Let's just talk this out." Talk? Like they'd talked to the elk? I scanned the shadows, planning my next evasion, when a distant, rising ululation sliced through the night. Sirens, growing louder, closer. A wave of profanity erupted from the direction of the trucks, followed by the frantic crashing of bodies, forcing passage through the undergrowth, scattering like rats. Relief, sudden and profound, buckled my knees. I leaned heavily against the cool stone. It was finished. Strobing beams of red and blue painted the trees in garish, fleeting colors. Slowly, I emerged, hands held high, identifying myself to the arriving uniforms. Concerned faces, rapid questions blurred around me. My gaze, however, locked onto the trucks, now islands of official activity in the swirling lights. Evidence bags were being filled, and there, laid bare under the harsh glare, were the severed antlers, magnificent even in their tragic separation. A grim satisfaction settled. The forest violation would not go unanswered. Guided towards the waiting ambulance, a weary sense of victory warred with profound exhaustion. Tonight, the woods breathed easier, the immediate threat quelled. My own path forward felt altered, the familiar rhythm of patrols irrevocably changed. Routine had shattered, replaced by the sharp awareness of teeth hidden in the dark. Yet there was no regret. To stand sentinel over this wild expanse, to guard its silent life, was less a profession than a covenant. And whatever shadows stirred beneath the canopy, whatever dangers the turning seasons might bring, Silas Thorne would be there, watchful, ready. The chime sliced through the post-midnight quiet. I was adrift on the couch, navigating the flickering wasteland of late-night television, searching for an anchor to pull me down into sleep. Stillness permeated the apartment. I'd extinguished the overhead glare, leaving only the intimate circle cast by a lone lamp on the end table. A faint coolness ghosted across my skin, perhaps real, perhaps imagined static from the solitude. Outside this haven, the building slumbered, the street a ribbon of vacant asphalt under a starless sky. Levering myself up, I drifted towards the wall near the kitchen archway where the intercom panel, an aged plastic rectangle, was mounted. Its speaker grill offered a faint crackle of anticipation. I depressed the talk button. Yes? A protracted hiss answered, static breathing down the line before a man's voice emerged, toneless and steady. Let me in. Unfamiliar. My gaze flickered to the narrow window overlooking the street. Through its angled pane, I could just discern the building's entrance, the external call panel beside it. One meager streetlight cast long shadows, supplemented by the distant neon blur of some forgotten sign. No figure occupied the pool of light. The threshold was vacant, the sidewalk desolate, yet the voice persisted, calm, quiet, utterly disembodied. I pressed closer to the speaker's perforations. Who is this? Only the empty rush of static replied. A beat of silence stretched. Hello? Identify yourself. The line clicked dead. I remained, fingers hovering over the panel, a knot of confusion tightening in my gut. I waited. Silence echoed. After a slow count to 30, I released the button. Back at the window, I scanned the vista again, more intently this time. The building's facade remained inert. No phantom cars whispered past. No late-night wanderers drifted by. Just the gloom and the feeble illumination of the lone lamppost. A prank, perhaps? I shrugged the thought on like a thin coat and retreated to the couch, attempting to re-engage with the television's hypnotic glow, though my pulse tapped a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Minutes crawled by before the intercom buzzed anew, a sharper insistence this time. I was on my feet instantly, crossing the room in quick strides, thumb jabbing the button. Yes? My voice was a low murmur. Let me in. The same dispassionate male tone returned, though now it seemed faintly obscured, as if filtered through muslin. I leaned my shoulder against a cool wall, consciously slowing my breath. Again the window beckoned. Forehead pressed to the cold glass, I peered out. Nothing. Utterly nothing. My phone screen glowed, 12:10 a.m. Turning back to the wall unit, I demanded, I can't see anyone. Who are you? Silence answered, punctuated by a faint electrical sigh. A parched feeling spread through my throat. I detoured to the kitchen sink, gulping water straight from a glass. The intercom fell silent for a longer interval. I stood sentinel before it, staring at the impassive plastic box. Should I call the authorities? But report what, exactly? An invisible man politely requesting entry via intercom? The notion felt ludicrous, flimsy. I resolved to ignore it, some intoxicated fool playing games. I resettled on the couch, nudging the television volume higher, a futile shield against the unease prickling at the edges of my awareness. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the building settling, drew my nerves taut. Perhaps 10 minutes later, though time felt warped, elastic, the buzzer erupted again. I shot upright, stumbling slightly in my haste. I mashed the talk button, shouting this time, "What is it you want?" The voice, unperturbed, level. Let me in. A cold fist clenched in my stomach. Button depressed again, I forced steadiness into my reply. I don't know who you are. Go away. My voice frayed at the end. Another pilgrimage to the window, cheek pressed flat against the glass, craning my neck for any obscured angle. Nothing. I could clearly see the external intercom panel itself. There was definitively no one activating it. A new imperative surfaced. Check the corridor. Undoing the deadbolt and chain, I cracked the apartment door open a sliver, peering into the dimly lit hallway. The usual quiet reigned. The elevator indicator showed it resting, dormant, on another floor. Silence pressed in, unbroken by footfalls or whispers. I retreated, securing the locks once more. Then, moved by an instinct I didn't question, I wedged a sturdy dining chair beneath the doorknob. It felt marginally safer. One last look out the window confirmed the street's continued emptiness. A lull descended. I sank into the armchair positioned near the window, my gaze fixed on the scene below. An occasional gust stirred debris on the asphalt, but no vehicles passed, no neighbors returned, no smokers haunted the doorway. Just stillness. Then, inevitably, the intercom buzzed. It must have been nearing 12:30 a.m. A frantic pulse hammered in my neck. I approached the panel, pressed the button, but offered no words. "Let me in," the voice reiterated, identical in its flat insistence. "I'm not letting anyone in," I stated, my voice tight. "I cannot see you out there. Stop this." Releasing the button, I listened intently. Only static whispered back. My palms were slick with sweat. I wiped them absently on the fabric of my sweatpants. My frustration curdled into action. I needed to silence the damn thing. Prying at the intercom panel's cover proved fruitless. I fetched a small screwdriver from a kitchen drawer, attacking the screws, but they were worn smooth, refusing purchase. Was there a plug? No, it was wired directly into the wall. Defeated, I struck the panel sharply with my open palm. It remained impassive. I grabbed my mobile, dialing the building superintendent's number. It rang, cycling endlessly into voicemail. Calling a friend crossed my mind, but the lateness of the hour and the sheer strangeness of the situation paralyzed me. What could I even articulate? I stood stranded in my own living room, breathing shallowly through my mouth, fighting for composure. The intercom rang again. "Go away," I yelled at the plastic grill. "I'm calling the police." I paused, listening for any reaction. The voice simply repeated, "Let me in." The thudding in my ears intensified. Another desperate glance out the window yielded the same result: emptiness. Pressing the talk button, a tremor in my voice, I asked, "How are you calling from the intercom if you're not standing outside?" No reply. I tried again. "Where are you?" Absolute silence. Right, the lobby. Perhaps seeing the source or its absence would break this fever dream. Keys jangling softly, a compact flashlight retrieved from a drawer clutched in my hand, I removed the chair barricade and slipped into the hallway. The corridor lighting cast its usual sallow, unwavering glow. I summoned the elevator. It arrived with surprising speed. The descent was unnervingly quiet, save for the low mechanical thrum. The lobby materialized, bathed in its standard fluorescent illumination. Everything appeared mundane: the bank of mailboxes, the worn welcome mat, the glass expanse of the front door. Approaching the entrance, I peered through the glass. The external intercom panel sat innocently beside the doorframe. I scrutinized it. Then cautiously, I pushed the door open, wedging it with my foot, and stepped onto the threshold. The sidewalk stretched vacant in both directions. The street exhaled silence. For a full minute, I stood there, scanning, listening, holding my breath. A distant engine murmured miles away, but proximity held only stillness. Retreating inside, I let the heavy door sigh shut. The outdoor panel looked untouched, inviolate. Just a metal box, a button, a speaker. On impulse, I pressed the button myself from the outside. A faint, familiar crackle echoed from the speaker within the lobby. Functional, normal. Walking back towards the elevator, my pocket vibrated. My mobile. I pulled it out, no signal bars. Strange. Even down here, I usually had a sliver of reception. I tried the wall-mounted landline, the building's courtesy phone. Dead. No dial tone. I stared at the inert receiver. A quick check confirmed the lobby lights worked perfectly. Just the phones were out. Stepping back into the elevator car, I pressed the button for my floor. The doors slid closed with a soft finality. As the car ascended, my mind raced. Someone was using the intercom, visibly absent, communications cut. A technical glitch? A repeating recording? I clung to that possibility, a flimsy raft in a sea of dread. But the voice had responded directly to my initial hello. Recordings don't converse. Emerging onto my floor, a subtle, high-frequency buzzing seemed to thrum in the air, an almost subliminal electrical hum. I moved cautiously down the corridor, hyper-aware of the closed doors of neighboring apartments. Silence. Inside my own unit, I re-engaged the locks, replaced the chair against the knob. My cell phone remained stubbornly offline. I paced the apartment, holding it aloft near windows, seeking a phantom signal. Nothing. The intercom's summons, when it came again, was sharper, like a sudden percussive bark. It made me flinch violently. I approached the panel warily, pressed the button. Before I could utter a sound, the voice commanded, "Let me in." I fought to regulate my breathing. Button held down, I spoke slowly, deliberately. "Unless you tell me who you are, I am not opening this door. I cannot see you." I waited. The line hissed emptily. I released the button. Another check at the window confirmed the unchanging tableau. Vacant pavement, dim light, absence. A dull ache began to throb behind my temples. Sweat beaded on my forehead, my t-shirt clinging damply to my back. I wiped my face on my sleeve, my mouth arid despite the water I'd drunk. The apartment's silence felt oppressive, amplifying every internal noise. The rasp of my own breath, the floorboards groaning under my weight, the refrigerator's low thrum. I tried the television again, desperate for external sound, any distraction. Flickering images slid past, meaningless. I switched it off. I found myself standing near the intercom again, simply waiting. Several minutes passed in this tense vigil. A glance at my phone, nearly 1 a.m. Barely an hour had elapsed since the first call, yet it felt like an eternity. The buzzer sounded. I drew a sharp breath through clenched teeth, pressed the button. This time I asked, "Why?" Silence. I pressed again. "I am not opening the door. Leave." The speaker emitted a sharp pop, followed by a deeper hiss, then nothing. I tapped the panel tentatively. The voice did not return. Holding the talk button, I whispered, "Hello?" Only silence answered. Stepping back, I watched the unit for long minutes. It remained inert. A new plan formed: descend via the stairwell. Maybe surprise was possible. Maybe I could catch a glimpse. The concrete steps felt cold beneath my feet, my sneakers squeaking faintly in the enclosed silence. Reaching the lobby level, I peered through the stairwell door's small wire glass window before emerging. Empty, as before. I eased the door open, still empty. Another survey of the street outside. No movement, no shadows playing tricks. I lingered for 2 full minutes, senses straining. Nothing. I retreated to the elevator. As it ascended, the overhead light flickered once, but violently, plunging the car into momentary darkness before restoring itself. My chest constricted. I swallowed against a dry lump in my throat. The elevator delivered me to my floor without further incident. Back inside, locks secured, I leaned against the door, forcing slow, deep breaths. The intercom rang. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked over, pressed the button. "I told you, I'm not letting you in," I said, my voice strained. This time, no words came back. Instead, there was only breathing, slow, rhythmic, unnervingly close through the speaker. I listened, finger frozen on the button, my hand trembling slightly. "What do you want?" I whispered. The breathing persisted for several more seconds, then ceased abruptly. I released the button, waiting in the charged silence. I pressed it again. "If you can hear me, just tell me who you are." No response. I let go. The intercom fell silent. I stared at the panel, the seconds stretching into an unbearable tautness. My own heartbeat drummed a frantic rhythm in my ears. Then it rang again. I nearly dropped the phone still clutched in my hand. I slammed the button. "Cut it out," I yelled. "Let me in," the voice replied. It sounded different now, closer, louder, as if the speaker were pressed directly against the microphone outside. Every muscle in my body seized. My jaw locked tight. My legs felt like stone pillars. I tried consciously to relax, to unnoop the tension, but fear held me rigid. I was pinned, cornered by an invisible, implacable presence. The thought of actually pressing the door release button sent a fresh wave of cold sweat down my spine. I began to pace the confines of the living room, my eyes constantly darting back to the intercom, treating it like a coiled viper. It remained quiet. I stood still, listening. After several minutes, it rang again. I pressed the button. "Let me in." I didn't speak this time. I just listened. The voice offered nothing more. No threats, no explanations, no anger. Just the same flat, unwavering request, repeated like a broken mantra. I tried to master my breathing, feeling a prickling sensation crawl up the back of my neck. My stomach was a tight knot of ice. Turning abruptly, I walked away from the panel, resolving not to answer again. It rang. I ignored it. It rang again, and again, and again. The relentless chime hammered at my skull. Gritting my teeth, I strode into the kitchen, yanking open the small utility closet door, searching for the circuit breaker panel. Found it. With trembling fingers, I began flipping switches. One by one, the apartment succumbed to darkness and silence. The refrigerator's hum died, the lamp extinguished, the television screen went black. Utter stillness descended, and then, impossibly, the intercom rang again. I stood frozen in the absolute dark, the only illumination, a faint, ghostly luminescence filtering through the window from the street lamp below. Slowly, mechanically, I moved back to the wall panel. My hand found the button. My voice, when it emerged, was a ragged whisper. "There's no power. How are you still calling?" The voice answered, unchanged, unwavering. "Let me in." I remained there in the blackness, finger depressing the button, the frantic thump of my own heart echoing in the void. I could feel sweat tracing paths down my face, my shirt clinging clammily to my skin. I licked my dry lips, struggling to form a coherent thought, any word of defiance or query. Nothing came. Finally, I managed a single syllable: no. I released the button. Stumbling towards the window, I peered out into the night. The street remained as it had been all along, empty, silent, devoid of explanation. I stayed by that window for what felt like hours, a sentinel guarding against nothing visible. The intercom chimed a few more times, each summons puncturing the profound silence. I ignored them. My body felt leaden, my legs cramped and aching. Eventually, the ringing ceased altogether. The ensuing silence was heavier, thicker than before. I waited in the darkness, my eyes slowly adjusting, mapping the familiar shapes of my furniture in the gloom. The intercom remained mute. The thought of restoring power flickered, but I didn't move. I simply stood, leaning against the cool wall, breathing shallowly, waiting for the next phase, whatever it might be. After a long while, I dragged the armchair closer to the window and sank into it, facing the street. I watched until my eyes burned with fatigue. Nothing changed. The intercom stayed silent. When the first tentative gray fingers of dawn began to probe the eastern sky, I was still there, awake, slumped in the chair, stiff, sore, and vigilant, watching an empty street rise to meet a new day. The voice never offered a reason. It never gave a name. It never deviated from its single chilling request. But I never opened the door. I never saw a soul. And as the sun climbed, bathing the city in ordinary light, the intercom remained blessedly, terrifyingly quiet. Yet for a long time afterward, every unexpected noise, every creak, every distant siren sent a jolt through me, my own breath catching in the silence of an apartment that no longer felt entirely empty. It began with a sliver of cardstock, innocuous amidst the Tuesday tide of bills and solicitations. Elias, nursing the day's first coffee by the kitchen window, nearly consigned it to the recycling bin. Autumn air, sharp and clean, carried the scent of decaying leaves. He paused, some instinct compelling him to flip the unremarkable photograph, a generic jumble of peaks he'd never scaled. The script on the reverse was precise, unfamiliar. The crimson trainers served you well on the esplanade this morning. Coffee stalled halfway to his lips. He had pounded the pavement earlier, his favorite red sneakers a blur against the asphalt. But the postmark, a city hundreds of miles distant, stamped nearly a week prior. A chill, unrelated to the morning air, snaked up from the base of his spine. He tried to rationalize it, a crossed wire in the postal service, a message meant for another soul residing at a phantom echo of his address. He buried the card in a drawer, a seed of disquiet planted. Throughout the day, the city's familiar rhythm felt off-key. Faces in the crowd seemed to linger, eyes potentially tracking his movements. Paranoia, he chided himself, born of a misdelivered trifle. 7 days dissolved the fragile comfort of denial. Another postcard surfaced, this time depicting a sun-drenched, unfamiliar cafe. His fingers, betraying a tremor he couldn't quell, turned it over. Impressive delivery. Cobalt is certainly your hue. The presentation that very morning. His trusted blue tie, ice formed in his veins. This was no stray arrow. It was aimed. He scrutinized the card, seeking any fissure in its impossible knowledge. A different city's postmark, again days old. How could ink on paper foretell an event yet to transpire when it was mailed? They became a relentless cadence after that, arriving with unsettling regularity. Ephemeral landscapes, windswept coasts, tranquil forests, bustling marketplaces he'd never visited, served as canvases for prescient truths. The new coiffure suits your profile, admired before the scissors fell. That disagreement with Alara must have stung. Kin can wound the deepest, dissected before the harsh words flew. Favor the left ankle, perhaps forgo tomorrow's exertions. A weakness cautioned against a run, yet contemplated. Each missive was a whisper from tomorrow, postmarked yesterday, originating from an ever-shifting atlas of distant towns. Obsession took root. Elias pinned them to a bulletin board, a constellation of dread spreading across the cork. He trawled the internet for connections between the depicted locales, finding only generic tourist traps, devoid of linkage. He began to deviate from his routines, injecting chaos into his schedule, taking circuitous routes home, frequenting new establishments, making impulsive choices, anything to disrupt the unseen observer's narrative. The effort proved futile. A card arrived promptly. The deviation through the arboretum was inspired, wasn't it? Such vibrant foliage this season. Sleep became a fugitive state, chased away by the feeling of being perpetually watched. Every face in the throng held potential menace. The barista crafting his morning brew, the silent neighbor across the hall, ghosts from a forgotten past nursing spectral grievances. He sought assistance from the constabulary, but without tangible threats. Their hands were tied. They offered platitudes about changing mail routes, advice that felt laughably inadequate against a specter wielding foreknowledge. In desperation, he engaged Ms. Thorne, a private investigator whose initial professional skepticism visibly eroded with each impossibly accurate card that continued to arrive. It defies logic, Elias, she confessed one afternoon. The collection spread like tarot cards across her desk. The timing, the intimacy, it's like temporal voyeurism, utterly baffling. They implemented countermeasures. Surveillance systems watched empty air around his apartment. Mail screening protocols proved porous. Even a temporary relocation to a friend's residence in another state offered no sanctuary. The postcards persisted, finding him unerringly. The observations sharpened, probing deeper into his psyche, his vulnerabilities. Your mother pines for your voice. Perhaps a call is overdue. That dermal irritation seems vexing. Have you considered melaleuca oil? Then the shift from invasive to menacing. A chilling whisper that broke through his remaining defenses. Your fear is palpable, rightly so. This fractured his resolve. He retreated from the world, extinguishing his life outside the apartment walls. Work ceased. Friendships faded. Curtains remained drawn against the accusing light of day. He became a hermit in his own home, starting at every floorboard creak, every siren's wail. The cards now materialized beneath his threshold, slipped silently into his isolation. Sanctuary is an illusion, one declared. Discovery is inevitable. He was ensnared, tormented by an omniscient pursuer, operating outside the known laws of time and space. How could one combat an adversary who held the script to your life before you'd lived the scene? Months bled into one another. His world contracted to the suffocating space between his door and the hallway floor, where each new missive appeared, retrieved with hands that shook uncontrollably. Then, disrupting the pattern, a Wednesday dawned gray and yielded not cardstock, but linen paper, a formal envelope, his name inscribed in that unnervingly familiar, precise script. For a long moment, he simply stared, trepidation warring with a desperate craving for clarity. What new form of psychological torture lay within? Curiosity, that persistent human frailty, finally overpowered fear. He broke the seal. Inside, a single leaf of paper, and nestled within its fold, a diminutive brass key. The note read, "The questions must be legion. Answers await. A depot locker yields to this key. Midnight. Solitude is imperative, lest the truth remain veiled." He must have traced the words 100 times, his mind a vortex of fear and anticipation. This was the summons, the potential confrontation, the chance to unmask his tormentor. Or was it a snare? Yet the gnawing need for understanding eclipsed the instinct for self-preservation. As the city clocks converged on midnight, Elias found himself navigating the cavernous, deserted train station, the small key cold against his palm. Locker 3B beckoned. His fingers fumbled with the lock, half braced for detonation or ambush. But the door swung open with a quiet click, revealing no threat, only a slim volume bound in worn, dark leather. He lifted it, opened it. The script leapt out. Intimate, known. His script. Pages chronicled thoughts unvoiced, experiences yet to unfold, emotions yet unfelt. Entries marched years ahead, meticulously detailing the genesis of temporal displacement, the staggering discovery, and the rationale behind the epistolary haunting. The paradox slammed into him with physical force. The stalker, the sender, the architect of his torment was Elias. He had been sending messages back through time to himself. As he stood there, unmoored, the journal clutched like a lifeline. A figure coalesced from the station's deep shadows. Elias knew, before the light fully caught the face, who it was, him, but older, etched with time's passage, eyes mirroring his own weary soul, carrying a weight he couldn't yet comprehend. "Forgive me," the elder Elias murmured, the sound thick with remorse. "My intent was preparation, insulation against shock. Instead, I delivered only anguish." But the purpose? Elias rasped, the question clawing its way past the lump in his throat. Why inflict this? His future iteration sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the dust of ages. "A cataclysm averted," he said softly, "an event that reshaped everything. But the intervention itself, I realized too late. It warped the timeline, seeding the very disaster I sought to uproot." Through the waning hours of the night, beneath the station's spectral glow, the elder spoke. He recounted unfolding years, spoke of discoveries and profound losses, of a world teetering on an unforeseen precipice. And now, Elias whispered, as the first hint of dawn bled bruised colors into the eastern sky. Now, the elder replied, his form already seeming less substantial. Destiny reclaims its course. The messages cease. Interference ends. Let the current flow as it must. And with that, he dissolved back into the ephemeral fabric from which he'd emerged. Elias remained alone on the platform, clutching the chronicle of a life potentially his, the weight of unlived years pressing down. Life resumed, but normalcy was a shore he could no longer reach. The postcards ceased, as promised, yet peace remained elusive, forever shadowed by the impossible knowledge he now carried. He became acutely conscious of each branching path, each decision freighted with the potential to steer him toward or away from that haunted visage in the station. The journal remained unburnt, locked away, a heavy testament to temporal paradox and the profound folly of manipulating fate. And sometimes, encountering a carousel of picture postcards in a shop window, a phantom coolness would trace his spine, whispering a chilling, recursive question that echoed in the chambers of his mind. Is this the moment it starts? The first intimation arrived like a physical blow, a sudden clenching deep within my gut that arrested my movements. I found myself staring, breath held, at the regulator clock mounted above my workbench. Its hands were stark against the porcelain face, 3:33, precisely. A quick, disbelieving scan confirmed the impossible. Every chronometer, every clock, every timepiece in my sanctuary of gears and springs echoed that exact moment. Grandfather clocks stood sentinel, their pendulums stilled mid-swing. Wall clocks presented identical frozen faces. Even the disassembled pocket watch on my bench, its tiny heart exposed, displayed hands locked at that unholy trinity of threes. A profound stillness descended, silencing the familiar, comforting chorus of ticks and talks that usually filled my nights. The air grew heavy, expectant. A bead of sweat traced a path down my temple, cool against my suddenly clammy skin. This was no trick of the eye, no fatigue-induced hallucination. This was real. I am Abel Croft, a horologist. My life revolves around the intricate dance of timepieces, coaxing life back into dormant mechanisms, mending fractured crystals, crafting bespoke instruments to measure the fleeting moments. Clients entrust me with heirlooms steeped in memory, time-worn artifacts rescued from dusty oblivion. The nocturnal solitude of my workshop, punctuated only by the rhythmic pulse of countless escapements, has always been my preferred milieu. That night, immersed in the delicate resurrection of an antique carriage clock promised for the weekend, I had risen for water, stretching cramped limbs. Returning, my gaze fell upon the towering regulator near the entrance, 3:33. Then, the ship's chronometer on the far wall, 3:33. A flicker of unease became a cold certainty as the vintage marine chronometer beside me showed the same. My stomach tightened into a knot. From a drawer, I retrieved a trusted digital quartz timer, its sterile accuracy a counterpoint to the analog beauty surrounding me. Its screen flared to life, displaying crisp, unwavering numerals. 3:33. A prickle crawled up my spine, compelling me to look over my shoulder into the shadowed corners. Nothing. Only the familiar clutter of my trade. Minuscule screwdrivers arrayed like surgical tools, tweezers poised, polishing cloths, scattered gears gleaming under the focused beam of my work lamp. My stool, a half-finished mug of now cold tea, the open maw of my toolbox, all ordinary. Yet the silence pressed in, absolute, as if the workshop itself held its breath. Even the low hum of the ancient refrigerator in the back room had ceased. I turned slowly, a full circle, confirming the impossible synchronicity. Every dial, every display held fast at that single instant. Then, a flicker at the edge of my sight. Near the tall shelves crammed with salvaged clock movements, skeletal remains cannibalized for parts. Not a shadow thrown by any familiar object, nor a trick of the light. It was a disturbance in the air itself, dark, amorphous, moving with a fluid grace between the rows of dormant mechanisms, like smoke coalescing, yet possessing a texture, an unsettling presence. My limbs felt leaden, unresponsive, yet some morbid curiosity propelled me forward. My own heartbeat hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the crushing silence. As I drew near the shelves, the shape dissolved, vanishing into the ambient shadows. I stood there, scanning the spaces between brass plates and coiled springs, hands trembling slightly. The air here felt distinctly colder, and turning back, my eyes sought the clocks again. Still 3:33. The sheer impossibility gnawed at me. Even defunct clocks rarely agreed. This was a coordinated cessation, a universal pause. A whisper, soft as dust settling, brushed against my hearing. I spun around, facing the storeroom door at the workshop's far end. Empty space greeted me, but the whispering persisted, a sibilant murmur just below the threshold of understanding. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Step by hesitant step, I moved towards the sound. It intensified slightly, a layered chorus of unintelligible fragments, before abruptly ceasing. Silence rushed back in, thick and suffocating. The thought of plunging the workshop into darkness, searching by touch and sound, was quickly discarded. I felt exposed, trapped within my own familiar space. A sudden urge for escape overwhelmed me. I hurried to the front door, fumbled with the lock, and stumbled out into the pre-dawn chill. The cool air, smelling of damp asphalt and distant city life, was a welcome shock. I pulled out my mobile phone. Its screen glowed 3:34. A fresh wave of nausea washed over me. Outside, time flowed. Inside, it remained fractured. I retreated further from the entrance, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. After several deep, steadying breaths, the tremor in my arms subsided. Steeling myself, I pushed the door open and re-entered. The familiar symphony of ticking immediately enveloped me. Every clock, every watch now showed 3:34, second hands sweeping forward with renewed purpose. A shaky sigh escaped my lips. Had I dreamt it? Imagined the entire episode? The lingering ice in my veins, the dampness on my brow screamed otherwise. I sank onto my stool, the familiar contours a small comfort. The clocks ticked on, oblivious. I watched them obsessively until past 4, but the strange stillness did not return. Eventually, locking the door behind me felt less like securing my workshop and more like sealing away a moment of profound unease. The following night found me back at my bench, compelled by a mixture of dread and fascination. Would the phenomenon repeat? While meticulously replacing the pinions on a delicate mantel clock, Adjusting its chime hammer, the familiar tension began to build around 3 o'clock. A weight settled on my shoulders. 3:28, 3:29. My palms grew damp. 3:31. A sharp, unnatural click emanated from the chronometer nearby. Its second hand hung motionless at the zenith. One by one, like falling dominoes, the other timepieces followed suit. By 3:33, the profound silence reigned once more. This time, the fear was tempered by a grim resolve. I rose deliberately, circling the room. I reached out, touching the cold glass face of a stopped wall clock. It felt utterly mundane. Tapping it yielded nothing. Then, the whispering began again, closer this time, seemingly originating from directly behind me. I whirled. The amorphous shadow undulated near my workbench, a patch of deeper darkness gliding low across the floorboards towards the corner by the door. No features, no discernible form, just pure, mobile negation. My heart hammered against my sternum. I pressed back against the cool plaster of the wall. The whispers coalesced, gaining a terrifying clarity amidst the overlapping susurrus. Phrases sliced through the murmur, moments squandered. Hours irretrievable. Fragments of memory surfaced unbidden. Deadlines ignored, passions abandoned, time frittered away on meaningless diversions. Each recollection struck like a physical blow. My vision blurred, breathing became a conscious effort. The shape drifted nearer, the voices swelling, weaving a tapestry of regret. Run. The instinct screamed, but my feet felt bolted to the floor. With a surge of defiance, I forced a step towards the encroaching darkness. No plan, only a refusal to cower. My knees buckled, but I shuffled forward. The whispering faltered, momentarily silenced by my advance, then resumed its insidious litany. Unfinished projects, broken promises, and time bleeding away. My hands shook uncontrollably. The shape flickered, then flowed like spilled ink towards the shelves of spare parts, melting into the shadows behind them. Slowly, tentatively, the ticking returned. A single beat, then another, multiplying until the workshop was once again filled with the comforting rhythm of measured time. The wall clock read 3:34. So it went, night after night. The inexorable arrival of 3:33 brought the suffocating silence, the spectral pause. Trying to remain outside proved futile. An invisible tether seemed to draw me back inside just before the appointed minute, compelling me to witness it. A new, high-precision digital timer joined its analog brethren in freezing solidarity. Attempts to record the event on my phone were equally fruitless. The video feed would simply halt at 3:33, resuming seamlessly at 3:34, as if the intervening minute had never occurred. The shadow things became a recurring feature, sometimes solitary, sometimes numerous. They drifted through my space, their whispers a constant commentary on my failures, my procrastination, my lost opportunities. Occasionally, my name, Abel, hissed from the darkness, sent a jolt of pure ice through me. Sleep became fragmented, snatched in daylight hours. I began arriving at the workshop near midnight, avoiding the concerned glances of daytime clients. My work suffered. Hands that were once steady now trembled, making delicate adjustments a trial. Simple tasks became Herculean. One night, desperate for proof, for validation, I deployed an arsenal of old digital cameras on tripods, aimed at key locations. Recording commenced at 2:50 a.m. As 3:33 struck, the workshop plunged into its customary stasis. The low whirring of the cameras ceased, their indicator lights froze. The shadows emerged, swirling with unnerving familiarity. The whispers intensified, cataloging my temporal debts. I forced myself to remain still, tracking one particular shape as it slid across the wall. It seemed to pause, to turn its featureless presence towards me. I felt scrutinized, judged, my chest constricted. I tried to shout, to defy them, but my throat closed, emitting only a dry click. Then 3:34 arrived. The clocks resumed their duty. The cameras blinked back to life. Reviewing the footage yielded nothing. Just Abel Croft, sitting at his bench, a minute inexplicably erased, leaving no trace of the intervening dread. I experimented. Different light spectra, rearranging the clocks, setting preemptive alarms, all useless. The freeze was absolute, the shadows persistent, their whispers evolved. We observe, they murmured one night. We wait. The implication hung heavy in the silent air. Yet they never touched me, never caused physical harm beyond the ragged state of my nerves. They simply manifested, whispered their accusations of squandered time, and vanished as the mechanism of the world lurched back into motion. Now I endure. The workshop remains my sanctuary and my prison. I cannot abandon my craft, these intricate machines that are extensions of myself. So I stay. I work. And each night I brace for 3:33. The dread is a familiar companion, yet I cannot look away. I watch the shadows glide, listen to the litany of lost moments, searching for a clue, a pattern, a reason. None has ever emerged. I accept this nightly haunting, this minute stolen from the continuum. The shadows arrive, spectral accountants tallying my wasted hours. They remind me of time's relentless passage and my own culpability in its misuse. Ignoring them invites proximity. Observing them maintains a fragile boundary. Then, at 3:34, they dissolve, leaving me in the sudden, almost deafening chorus of ticking clocks, my heart pounding a frantic counterpoint. This is my reality now. Night after night, the same ritual, fixing time for others while haunted by my own lost minutes. Waiting, hands unsteady, as the shadows gather and whisper truths I cannot escape, truths reflected in the stopped hands of 1,000 clocks. Time restarts, and I continue, carrying the weight of those missing moments until the next night falls. There's a particular disquiet that settles in places unstuck from time, locales where the air itself feels preserved, impervious to the frantic pulse of the world beyond. Such was the sensation that claimed me the instant I breached the threshold of that forsaken hotel. Trespass was not my intent, yet a ravenous curiosity had gnawed through reason. In retrospect, that impulse feels like a phantom limb, an urge I desperately wish I'd amputated, for once enveloped by its walls, an undeniable wrongness permeated the structure, an inexplicable presence that clings to memory still. It began, as these things often do, with a whisper. My companion, Leo, and I were adrift on a ribbon of asphalt, charting a course toward a rendezvous with friends for a weekend steeped in campfire smoke and starlight. A pause for sustenance led us to a roadside diner, where Leo, ever the collector of stray narratives, first caught wind of the place. The waitress, a woman whose fatigue seemed etched into the lines around her eyes, spoke of it idly between refilling coffee cups. "Decades derelict," she murmured, perched on the lip of a small, forgotten lake just beyond the town's edge. A glittering jewel of the roaring 20s, she claimed, until something transpired. A vague, unspoken catastrophe that bled the life from it, leaving only a husk for nature to reclaim. Leo's eyes predictably ignited. "We have to see it," he declared, the familiar thrill-seeker's grin bisecting his face. My own enthusiasm remained stubbornly dormant. A subtle chill had accompanied the waitress's words, a sense that this particular secret was buried for sound reason. Yet Leo pressed, persuasive. "Imagine it. An adventure before the adventure. Hours to kill. What secrets might be locked inside?" My instincts screamed negation, a cold, sharp warning ignored. With a shrug that felt like a betrayal of self, I acquiesced. What harm resided in a decaying edifice, truly? What specter could possibly lurk worse than imagination? We navigated toward the hotel as twilight bled across the sky, guided by the waitress's fragmented directions. The lane narrowed, becoming a tunnel carved through dense woods, branches interlocking overhead like skeletal fingers. Silence descended, profound and absolute, swallowing the highway's distant drone, leaving only the sibilant whisper of wind through leaves. And then it loomed. The hotel materialized from the gloaming, immense, a crumbling titan against the darkening trees. Its grandeur was a ghost. The facade wept plaster, windows gaped like vacant sockets, sections of the roof bowed in surrender. Ivy scaled the walls, tenacious green tendrils probing cracked balconies. But it was the lake, glimpsed through a screen of skeletal trees behind the structure, that truly arrested me. Utterly, preternaturally still. A perfect obsidian mirror reflecting the bruised twilight sky, devoid of ripple or current. It seemed suspended, as if the water itself held its breath in anticipation. An unnatural tranquility. Leo, immune to such subtleties, was already out of the car, striding toward the main entrance with palpable excitement. A flicker of unease, a backward glance at the unmoving water, and then I hurried after him. The thought of being left alone in that encroaching silence suddenly unbearable. The great doors improbably yielded to Leo's push, groaning in protest. A miasma of dust and decay rolled out to meet us, thick with the scent of time itself decomposing. The lobby gaped, cavernous, dominated by a sweeping staircase ascending into shadow. Above, a colossal chandelier hung like a frozen firework, shedding crystals like tears onto the debris-strewn floor below. Wallpaper curled away from the walls in strips, revealing the lath and plaster bones beneath. Broken furniture, shards of glass, fallen chunks of ceiling, the expected detritus of neglect. Yet beneath it lay something else, an oppressive weight, a palpable density to the air, as if the very walls retained memories they refused to relinquish. Our footsteps were swallowed by the vast silence as we moved through the lobby. Leo, buoyant, snapped photos with his phone, pointing out shadowed alcoves and doorways ripe for exploration. I feigned interest, but with each step deeper into the hotel's heart, the unease intensified. The air grew heavier, breathing became a conscious effort, and every minor sound, a scuttling unseen, the sigh of settling dust, seemed to resonate unnaturally long. We ascended the grand staircase, the wood groaning beneath our weight like a dying beast. Upstairs, corridors stretched away, lined with guest rooms, their doors askew on rusted hinges. The wallpaper here was a mere phantom, bleached and shredded by time. Leo veered toward the guest rooms, eager for discovery, but my attention snagged on something else. At the corridor's terminus stood a single door, larger than the others, emphatically closed. It radiated a sense of otherness, a focal point in the decay. I called Leo back. Together, we approached it, the air thickening with each step until my chest felt constricted, bound by an invisible force. Yet compulsion overruled caution. The need to know what lay beyond became absolute. Leo reached the tarnished brass knob first. It turned with a loud, decisive click. The door swung inward with ponderous slowness, unveiling what must have once been a ballroom. The scale was breathtaking. Towering windows, floor to ceiling, lined one wall, though now opaque with decades of grime. Another immense chandelier, twinned to the lobbies, hung shrouded in dust. The parquet floor was a wreck, littered with the splintered remains of chairs, overturned tables, and in a far corner, a skeletal grand piano, its keys yellowed like old teeth. But the room's decaying majesty wasn't what stopped my breath. It was the figures. Silhouetted against the grimy windows, initially, I registered them as mannequins, perhaps, or strangely preserved statues. 5 of them stood, utterly motionless, their backs to us. Clad in attire from a bygone era, heads tilted slightly, they seemed to gaze out at the quiescent lake. Their stillness was absolute, unnervingly perfect. I started to voice my observation to Leo, but then a shift, infinitesimal, barely perceptible, yet undeniable. One figure's head pivoted slowly, just enough to reveal a sliver of profile against the dim light. My lungs seized. Statues they were not. They were people, or the husks of them. Their visible skin possessed a pallor that wasn't pale but gray, like ash. Their period clothing hung loosely, faded and threadbare. They simply stood, locked in their silent vigil toward the lake. The one that had moved with excruciating slowness returned its gaze to the window, resuming its perfect immobility. Leo remained oblivious, captivated by the ruined grandeur around us. My hand, trembling uncontrollably, shot out, seizing his arm, pulling him back toward the doorway. "We have to go," I breathed, the words barely audible above the frantic drumming in my ears. Leo frowned, bewildered. "Go? Why? We just got in here." "Look," I hissed, jerking my chin toward the silent assembly by the windows. He followed my direction. Understanding dawned, leaching the color from his face, replacing excitement with stark, primal fear. For a stretched second, we were paralyzed, twin statues ourselves, watching the watchers. Then, with no warning, one of them rotated fully, smoothly, unnaturally. Its eyes were voids, stretched impossibly wide within their sockets. Its mouth hung slack, a dark O of surprise or a silent, unending scream. And as we watched, horrified, the others began to turn. One by one, a synchronized, dreadful rotation, their heads swiveling on unseen mechanisms, until all 5 faced us. That broke the spell. We fled. A blind, stumbling retreat down the corridor, down the groaning stairs, across the debris-strewn lobby, bursting out into the twilight air. We didn't cease running until the car doors slammed shut, our breathing ragged, tearing at the sudden silence. Keys fumbled, engine roared. I refused to look back, yet I felt them, felt their collective gaze boring into us from those dark windows. Leo said nothing, his knuckles white on the wheel as he wrestled the car back down the winding, isolated road. the hotel shrinking into the encroaching night behind us. Silence reigned in the car until the familiar, mundane glow of the highway welcomed us back into the stream of the living. What resided in that hotel I cannot name, but abandoned? No, it was occupied. Something lingered there, patient and preserved, waiting in the stillness. And whatever it was, it did not wish to be disturbed. The echo of Leo's laughter seemed to hang in the air, a cruel counterpoint to the void where he'd been moments before, jesting about the tragically charred steak. Now, absence. A sudden, inexplicable emptiness at our dinner table. Little did I grasp that this vanishing act was merely the opening chord of a symphony of dread destined to shatter our serene lakeside escape. My name is Clara. What commenced as a much-anticipated respite with cherished friends devolved into a desperate struggle against a predator cloaked in impossibility. 6 of us sought refuge from the city's clamor. Myself and my partner, Julian, Leo and Maya, Reese and Chloe. Months of planning had culminated in this pilgrimage to tranquility, a long weekend promised by the allure of a secluded lake house. Upon arrival that Friday afternoon, the house itself felt like a benediction. Nestled within a private cove, it offered a panoramic embrace of water and whispering woods. Its rustic heart pulsed with warmth, promising cozy evenings. Ample bedrooms awaited each couple, and a generous living space beckoned for convivial nights filled with strategy games and clinking glasses. That inaugural evening unfolded exactly as envisioned. We commanded the grill on the expansive deck, narratives and laughter intermingling with the scent of pine as the sun bled crimson across the lake. Later, huddled around the fire pit's flickering heart, we toasted marshmallows under a canopy stitched with stars, cocooned in what felt like our own pocket of paradise. Saturday dawned with the same gentle promise. Reese and Leo, early risers, pursued elusive fish while the rest of us indulged in a languid breakfast on the porch, the air sweet with morning dew. The afternoon dissolved in a haze of sun-warmed skin, dips in the lake's crystalline cool, shared meals, and effortless camaraderie. It was dinner, however, that fractured the idyll. We were gathered around the substantial dining table, plates laden with the aforementioned steak, a testament to Julian's ambitious, if flawed, grilling technique. Leo had just delivered a groaner of a joke, earning a chorus of affectionate moans. I reached for the salt, a mundane gesture. When my gaze returned to Leo's place, it found only the chair, stark and unoccupied. Initially, dismissal, a quick trip to the restroom, perhaps, or fetching something from the kitchen. But the seconds stretched into an unnerving stillness. He didn't reappear. A cold tendril of unease began to coil in my gut. Where did Leo go? Maya's voice sliced through the convivial remnants, articulating the question blooming in every mind. We called his name. We combed through every room, peered into closets, scanned the deck and the immediate yard. Nothing. It was as though the very air had absorbed him. The atmosphere shifted instantaneously, camaraderie curdling into a palpable tension. Rationalization surfaced, a sudden urge for a walk, slipping out unnoticed, yet they felt hollow. deep down, a discordant certainty resonated. Leo wouldn't simply evaporate mid-meal, mid-sentence without a word. A decision coalesced. Divide. Search the grounds. Reese and Chloe descended the path, winding toward the lake's dark mirror. Julian and I plunged into the dense woods, flanking the house. Maya remained, a vigil keeper should Leo reappear. As Julian and I navigated the thick undergrowth, our calls of Leo, swallowed by the trees, the distinct sensation of being observed prickled my skin. The forest, serene hours earlier, now felt charged, watchful, its shadows coalescing into unnerving shapes just beyond the periphery of vision. An hour yielded nothing but scratches and rising fear. We reconvened at the house, hope dwindling. Reese and Chloe had returned empty-handed, their faces mirroring our own frustration and burgeoning dread. Maya paced the living room, tears tracing paths on her cheeks. "We need to call someone," Chloe insisted, her voice trembling. Julian retrieved his phone, but the screen displayed only the stark pronouncement, "No service." We'd known reception was unreliable, but now this digital isolation felt like a tightening noose. The landline, I remembered, a flicker of hope, but lifting the receiver yielded only the flat, final sound of a dead line. We were adrift, severed from the outside world, and one of our own had been plucked from our midst. Night deepened, amplifying our paranoia. Each creak of the settling house became a potential intrusion. We clustered in the living room, the comfort of proximity warring with the suffocating fear. Around midnight, Maya declared a need for air, stepping onto the screened porch. The slap of the door closing echoed unnaturally loud. Less than a minute elapsed before a scream tore through the night, a sound ripped from the throat of primal terror. We surged outside. The porch stood empty. Maya was gone, swallowed by the impenetrable darkness hugging the house. Panic detonated. Reese began shouting into the night, challenging the unseen tormentor. Chloe collapsed into shuddering sobs. Julian attempted to project calm, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. We retreated, locking every door, every window, transforming the house into a fragile fortress. Sleep was unthinkable. We established a rotating watch, though against what precisely remained terrifyingly ambiguous. As the first fragile light of dawn painted the lake in hues of gray and rose, a desperate strategy formed. Roz and Julian would brave the drive to the nearest town, summon help. Chloe and I would hold the fort, clinging to the sliver of hope that Leo or Maya might somehow return. I watched from the window as the men climbed into the car. The engine coughed, then caught a fragile sputter of hope in the oppressive silence. But as they navigated the long, winding driveway, the vehicle abruptly swerved, a sickening lurch off the gravel path, a brutal meeting with an ancient oak. I saw Reese and Julian slump forward, inert. Chloe and I bolted outside, screaming their names, but before we could reach the wreck, a strange, pearlescent mist billowed, shrouding the car. Seconds later, it dissipated, revealing the impossible. The car was empty. Reese and Julian had vanished, consumed like the others. Terror absolute propelled us back to the house. We barricaded ourselves in a bedroom, shoving a cumbersome walnut dresser against the door until it groaned in protest. Huddled on the bed, clutching each other, we wept, "What is happening?" Chloe whimpered, the question echoing in the tomb-like silence. "Who is doing this?" I could only shake my head, my thoughts a frantic, disjointed scramble against the sheer impossibility of the last 24 hours. The day bled away. We remained imprisoned in that room, thirst and hunger secondary to the paralyzing fear. We alternated watch, though true rest was a phantom. It was during my vigil, as the sun dipped low, painting the room in long shadows, that I heard it, a faint, insistent scritch against the wood of the door. At first, I dismissed it as my frayed nerves, but then, undeniably, the doorknob began to rotate, slow, deliberate. I shook Chloe awake, a finger pressed to my lips for silence. Together we watched, transfixed in horror, as the knob turned fully, then stopped. A breath held, silence stretched taut. Then, the dresser blocking the door began to move. It slid across the floorboards, inch by agonizing inch, propelled by an unseen, inexorable pressure. Chloe and I scrambled backward, pressing ourselves against the far wall as the door swung silently inward. The hallway beyond was empty. No intruder, no monster, just vacant space. Then Chloe gasped, her eyes wide, fixed on something over my shoulder. I followed her terrified gaze to the antique mirror hanging on the opposite wall. Reflected within it stood a figure. It was impossibly tall, gaunt, its limbs elongated beyond human proportion. Its face, if such a term applied, was a horrifying negation, a smooth, featureless void. As we stared, paralyzed, it raised one disturbingly long arm, pointing directly at us. I felt a bizarre, visceral tug, as if invisible threads had snagged my very essence, attempting to reel me toward the abyssal presence. Chloe screamed, shattering the stasis. We bolted. Blind flight propelled us from the room, through the house, and out into the consuming night. The forest became a gauntlet, branches lashing, roots tripping. How long we ran, or where, I cannot say. We simply ran until our lungs burned and our legs screamed, until we burst, ragged and sobbing, from the tree line onto the blessed asphalt of a road. Headlights approached, twin beams slicing through the oppressive dark like a promise of salvation. We flagged down the car, surely appearing as specters, wild-eyed, clothes torn, babbling incoherently. The elderly couple inside, initially startled by our frantic state, showed compassion, driving us to the sanctuary of the nearest police station. The authorities investigated. They scoured the lake house, combed the woods. They found no trace of Leo, Maya, Reese, or Julian. No sign of the figure from the mirror. The official narrative settled on a tragic, inexplicable sequence of accidents, perhaps compounded by stress-induced hysteria in the isolation. But Chloe and I know differently. Something ancient and predatory stalked us that weekend, a thing untethered to the rational world. Sometimes, in the deepest quiet of night, when the world sleeps, I still feel that spectral tug, a chilling reminder that it might still be out there, patient, waiting to complete its collection. 6 friends arrived at that lake house, seeking escape. Only 2 departed, and not a single day passes that I don't wrestle with the fate of the others. Are they truly gone, or are they ensnared somewhere beyond comprehension, trapped in the endless nightmare that began beside that placid lake? One truth remains indelible. I will never again go near that water. Some idyllic retreats harbor shadows too deep to disturb.